Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Rochelle. It is lovely to have you here, or hello for the first time if you're new. My channel is all about slow intentional living with a young family, and I post 2 videos a week. On Tuesdays I post our vlogs, and on Fridays I post chatty videos like this one. So today's video is going to be all about why I am having an elective caesarean for my second birth. When the first time around I had a hypnobirth midwife model of care, and I didn't see an obstetrician until about 30 minutes before my son was born. My whole pregnancy I never saw a doctor other than my GP. And this time around I have elected to have an obstetrician right through, and I thought I would share my reasons why and a little bit about my story. Yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that this is just my story. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will be your choice. If you're in the situation where you're due to make a decision about your birth plan, that maybe this video could help you. I also want to wipe away any feelings of shame around having an elective caesarean. I know some people say an elective caesarean is for people who are too posh to push, and I certainly believe that that is not the case. Caesareans come with, if they're a major operation, they come with their own significant risks, and the recovery can be easy and straightforward, but it can also have its own complications and can take, in Australia at least, insurance companies won't cover you to drive for around 6 weeks, depending on your clearance from your doctor. So it's not an easy decision to make. It's not the easy way out by any means. And I think that people who choose to have an elective caesarean are just as brave as mothers who choose to have a natural birth with no pain or medical intervention. So yeah, I just wanted to cover those few things. So I'm not an expert. Do not take this as the only route or option for you if you have to look at your personal situation. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. When we decided to start a family, I must admit the main thing that I was really nervous and anxious about was the birth. I've never been very good with needles or medical interventions in any way. So when I was looking into my options for a model of care for my first pregnancy, I found out about the option that you can have a private midwife, and private meaning not like as in expensive private, like you have to have private healthcare, but private as in not associated with a hospital or any other kind of obstetricians or anything like that. They practice on their own. They're licensed to practice as midwives. These kind of midwives are available. They have their own clinics. Often you can elect to have a home birth with them if you like. Some of them are registered with hospitals, so if you choose to have like a hospital birth, you can still have your private midwife attend your birth and be your main carer throughout the labour. So I chose to have that option, and partly the reason I found out about this was because one of my girlfriends was training to be a midwife, and she had been posting a little bit on Facebook about her experiences, like what she was learning and everything, and she had this thing called hypnobirthing that she was teaching, and to me that sounded ideal. So I contacted her and she let me know that she was teaching out of a certain clinic, and I met with the midwives at the clinic where she was working and doing these hypnobirthing classes. And as a first-time anxious mum, it was the ideal scenario for my care. My appointments were an hour long every time, and I saw them once a month, and then towards the end, fortnightly, and then weekly, as you normally would. It never felt rushed in any way. They had a little kitchen where you could have a cup of tea if you wanted. It was very much kind of like how you would feel like going to your mum or nan's place and just being looked after. But I never had any sort of scares. If there wasn't something to be concerned about, then they didn't raise the issue, compared to, say, the medical mode of care where, right or wrong, it is very focused on the risk factors, and I will talk about that a little bit with my second pregnancy. But my first pregnancy was like a dream. It was like the ultimate pregnancy. I had a blessing way rather than a baby shower, which is where all the women in your life come together. I had my belly painted and we had the party in a lovely park. It was just absolutely beautiful. One of my girlfriends set up a crystal station, and she had everybody who attended could choose a crystal and a message for me. And I had that crystal. She made a talisman for me. I had that throughout my labor, and that was all very beautiful stuff. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend that mode of care for every woman, especially first-time mums, and especially if you're a little bit anxious. By the end of my pregnancy, I was not nervous at all. When my labor started with Max, I woke at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they will tell you it's not like in the movies. When your waters break, you don't get a big rush of waters just going everywhere, but that actually did happen for me. So about 7 o'clock in the morning, Rolly and I got up, and we decided that we would let our midwife know that it looked like things were starting. It was at that time that I noticed that the waters that were still coming out were tinged just a little bit greeny brown, which is a sign that there might be meconium in the water. So in those cases, they want you to just come into the hospital and be checked out. I met my midwife there. They did an assessment where they measure the strength of your contractions, and they were really, really strong. I was only like 1 or 2 centimeters dilated, but because of the strength of my contractions, they decided to admit me anyway, even though you're not supposed to be admitted until you're 4 centimeters. I wasn't able to go to the toilet, so my bladder was really full, and that's when things started to get a little bit iffy. I had to have a little bit more medical intervention by then because I'd been in hospital for over 12 hours, so they wanted to see me go to the toilet, or I needed to have a catheter put in, which I wasn't comfortable with. And then that kind of, all of these things, like they wanted to monitor the baby a bit more and put a scanning thing on my belly permanently, just, you know, to see if he was okay. It was decided that I would have an epidural, and then in the morning we would try, you know, hopefully by then I would be fully dilated and we could start, you know, the process of actually giving birth. Something was obviously not quite right. I was fully dilated, but Max started to go in reverse. So instead of coming further down the birth canal, he started to go back inside. It was coming up to 24 hours of me being in hospital and close to 30 hours of like labor. The doctor said to Rolly and I, at this point, you've got 2 options here. We can start to use instruments such as a vacuum or forceps, or we can elect for a cesarean. There was no 2 ways. We both said, yes, definitely, let's go the cesarean. And Max was born at midday that day. A few days postpartum, when I was at home and I had my midwife coming out to me every day and just making sure everything was going in the right way with recovery, yes, she let me know that the doctor's report was that it appeared that I had had a negative reaction to the syntocinon that they give you. And syntocinon is like the synthetic version of oxytocin, and they give that to you after you've had an epidural to get labor moving again when it's time to give birth. So what had happened is, because I was having those really strong contractions early on in my labor, it was as if my uterus had overworked itself. I developed something called a Bandl's ring, which is a fairly rare scenario, and let me show you a photo. So this is out of my hypnobirthing book, and it shows the muscles in your uterus. So you can see on one side, these are the muscles that go this way down, and they kind of squish the baby this way too, yeah. And then you've got muscles in the uterus that go this way, and they sort of push the baby down. Yeah, so basically my uterus overworked itself, pulled a muscle, and wasn't really able to push down to get Max out. So that is why he was sort of getting stuck, or even kind of reversing a little bit. So that is actually really lucky that I was able to have the option of a cesarean in that case. And because that has happened once, it is extremely likely that it will happen again. And that is the main reason why I've chosen to have an elective cesarean this time around. So my doctor and my midwife had advised me that because of this particular outcome that I had, this Bandl's ring, which is fairly rare, it is probably better off if I just have a cesarean. And for my midwife to say that as well, to me, that is sort of like confirmation that it is the right choice to have an elective. In my mind, I'd always thought like a cesarean was this horrible clinical thing, but in actual fact, the room was really welcoming. The people in there were lovely. The anaesthetist and the nurses and the obstetrician, they were all really understanding, really caring, and it was a really relaxed environment. I remember having music on, and they asked me what I wanted to listen to. and I didn't feel like it was this bad thing or this horrible experience that took away from the feeling that I'd given birth. When I was pregnant with Max, I needed someone to advocate for me. I needed a voice. I needed someone to, you know, make sure that I got what I needed. One of the big themes in my life at the moment is learning to speak up for what I want on my own behalf. So I'm using this experience to practice that because I'm not very good at it. You might remember in one of my Christmas vlogs, if you watched those, that I once broke a $50 candle in a shop when I was buying Christmas presents. And I didn't actually want the candle, but the guy assumed that I wanted it, gave me another one so that I could buy it. He said, like, I'll write this one off, but you can have a new one. And I paid $50 for a candle I didn't want because I was too timid to speak up and say, I actually don't want that candle. I'm really sorry I broke it, but you know, I don't want it. So it is a thing for me that I need to learn how to advocate for myself. Yes, so that is part of, like, it's been a really good experience to sort of talk to my obstetrician and say these are the things that I want. Delayed cord clamping, a vaginal swab if possible, you know, lowering the curtain so that I can see the baby coming out, and most importantly, skin to skin. I'm so glad that this isn't my first pregnancy or that I had the opportunity to go with a midwife and have that model of care, that nurturing model of care. And I'm not knocking obstetricians and I'm not knocking the medicalized kind of model of care, but it is a different experience. Yeah, so, you know, there's been a few things within this pregnancy that have sort of, if this was my first pregnancy, I would be a lot more anxious based around some of the news that I've received. You might have seen earlier on when I had my 12-week scan that this baby had a little bit thicker fluid on the back of the neck, and so I was classed as high risk for Down syndrome, so I had to go through further testing, which involved a chromosome blood test called the Harmony test, and also having my 20-week scan done earlier at a tertiary clinic just to check the baby's heart and growth and everything to rule out other birth abnormalities. Like, that was quite scary, and it was a couple of weeks where I was pretty stressed that, you know, and thinking that we were preparing for having a baby born with either a disability or something like that. And all of that was fairly unnecessary because when I went through it all, the baby actually ended up having, you know, with those extra tests, the baby had a lower risk of having Down syndrome than even Max had. If it was my first pregnancy, I would feel a lot more anxious about it. But another woman in my situation may decide to try for a natural delivery and then just see how things go. But from my perspective and the kind of person that I am, it is the right choice for me to have an elective. I don't feel like I'm going to be missing out. I'm more of a gentle-natured person. I don't have that lioness sort of toughness in me required. Like, I just didn't have the energy or the capability to, you know, push like they want you to and get really into it. Yeah, so from that perspective, I think like having an elective cesarean makes me feel more womanly, more in control and more brave than trying to go through another labor and failing and having, you know, more interventions and things like that. I know in my heart that it's not impossible for me to have a labor, but that it wouldn't be the fulfilling experience that some women have. Yeah, I think we're really lucky to live in a situation where we have the option to have an elective cesarean. You know, thinking about it, like, I could have been one of those women 100 years ago that died in labor because of, you know, those complications. Things could have gone completely differently for me if I didn't have, you know, it's really lovely that I've got the opportunity to have a natural pain relief free birth if I want to go that route, but that when things don't go quite right, I have the best medical care available, and that I can have a cesarean and know that that's just as safe for me and my baby. Yeah, so April is actually Cesarean Awareness Month, and I know that the level of cesareans is increasing and it is a little bit too high, and I wish that I wasn't one of the women that you know, contributed to that 30 or something % of births that are delivered by caesarean. I wish that that number was lower, but you know, we have options, and if that's the option that we've chosen, that's okay. We can't get too judgy on each other either way. It is so amazing that we have all of these options available to us. You know, for some women, having a natural birth and, you know, at home, or a water birth or whatever, is the most empowering experience of their life. For some women, it isn't. And I don't feel like I've missed out. I think I feel really good about having the ability to make the choice. I feel like I'm empowered because I've made a choice that's best for me and best for my baby and best for our family, that I will have an elective. The recovery, I know, may or may not go according to plan, and that is a bridge that we'll have to come to. But I'm really lucky that I have the support of Rolly and our parents, if we need it, and that we are really flexible with our working arrangements, that Rolly can be home to help me as much as I need in those first few weeks. I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it. We had a hospital tour the other day, and we had a birthing class that was especially for people with who are having an elective caesarean, and it was really nice to meet other mums who are doing the same. Yeah, so that is basically it. That is why I'm having an elective caesarean this time around. We all have to support each other as women to make the best choices that we can for ourselves and for our family. You know, our mental health as well comes into play hugely when it comes to the way we give birth, and our connection with our kids. And you know, that postpartum period, postnatal depression is really a hard thing to take, and shame around the way we give birth only adds to that, and it's not necessary, because however you give birth, you're a brave, strong woman, and I really believe that we need to lay off each other with our choices around how we give birth and how we parent our children. Same as things like extended breastfeeding. There's so much judgment, and we really need to be supporting mums to do things the way that they want to do. Thank you for choosing this video to click on. I realize that your time is very valuable, so I really do appreciate you spending 20 minutes or whatever, however long this video is, with me. So thanks again, and have a beautiful day. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.